worry, Jack. Chucky's back.
Child's Play 2.
Welcome back to the third annual Halloween special. I'm here to talk about Child's Play 2, directed by Lafia, and is the sequel to the 1988 classic. Now, when it comes to Child's Play 2, originally it received very polarized reviews from critics, and I'm like, what? And I'll never really understand that, because I think this movie is incredibly good, especially all these years later, and honestly, I think it's the best of the sequels. It's not 100% perfect or anything. It still has, like, a few flaws, which I will discuss, but still, it's still pretty good, especially since, obviously, it's a film that's not meant to be taken seriously. This is a movie that has a doll running around killing people, and it's clear that it's not meant to be taken seriously. Sure, there are some serious moments in the original, but this one has its moments of comedy, and it works extremely well. But before I get any farther into the video, I have to do something very special. And here it is.
Hey Brevin, it is Alex Vincent and Andy Barkley with Chucky himself, your friend to the end and mine. You're doing your third annual Halloween special on your YouTube channel, and this year you'll be reviewing Child's Play 2, 1990, starring him and me. Awesome. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have nice things to say. I'm sure you will. I hope a lot of people tune in and watch your review of Child's Play 2. This doll, in fact, was actually made to look exactly like the Child's Play 2 doll, but he's from Cult of Chucky. But that's what he was designed after. So, I appreciate the kind words. I wish you a lot of luck with your YouTube channel, and enjoy Child's Play 2.
I want to give a big thank you to Alex Vincent for sending me that video, and honestly, I really felt like I needed him to, at least do like a short collaboration with him, because honestly, I think that Child's Play 2 is really, honestly, one of the best of the sequels of the Chucky series. Sure, there are some that I don't really like, or I think that some are really bad. The worst ones for me are mostly Child's Play 3 and Seed of Chucky, which I'll probably talk about later on this channel, but I'm not sure if I'll have time to review any more of the Chucky movies this year for my Halloween special. But mostly, when it comes to Child's Play 2, it does have its moments. I think it's pretty entertaining for what it is. Sure, it does have its horror elements, but for the most part, it's not really meant to be taken seriously. And I love it just for that. And it mostly has some of my favorite kills in the series, and possibly, honestly, my favorite death of Chucky in the series, which I'll get to later in the video. It's hilarious, but pretty awesome at the same time. But besides all of that, I think it does have some good performances. I've always liked Alex Vincent in these movies, and Christine Elise, I hope I said her name right, as Kyle, I really like her in Child's Play 2, and I'm happy that they brought her back in Cult of Chucky. And of course, when it comes to Brad Dourif as Chucky, I've always liked him as Chucky, and he nails the role perfectly, down to the voice, that laugh. I'll never get tired of that laugh. We need a villain to have like a sort of evil laugh. Mostly, the one famous villain who gives like some evil laughter. The most famous villain that you could possibly think of is possibly the Joker. But mostly when it comes to Chucky, I think he should be on that category of villains who have that insane type of laughter, because That's the kind of villain that I like. But despite that, I mean, I've always liked Brad Dourif as the voice of Chucky. Even though in the first Child's Play, I mean, I liked his short scenes in his human form as Charles Lee Ray, but mostly, overall, I just think he's perfect as the character, and despite the fact in the reboot that I did like Mark Hamill as Chucky, I've always loved Mark Hamill. I love him as Luke Skywalker, and of course, I think he's perfect as the voice of the Joker. I thought his work as Chucky was at least acceptable, but mostly, honestly, you can't replace Brad Dourif. It's just impossible. But now, overall, when it comes to Child's Play 2, I just think it's a lot of fun. But, of course, now I'm going to get further into the plot, and as well as some spoilers, you have been warned. Mostly when it comes to Child's Play 2, honestly, I haven't seen the movie in years. I know that, I mean, I remember as a kid, I liked it. It was actually, I mean, like I mentioned, it's one of my favorite of the sequels. I honestly thought that, I mean, I thought it was a very unique horror film. So 2 years have passed after the events of Child's Play. Andy Barclay is put into foster care, and his mother is in a mental institution due to her backing up his story about Chucky. However, during all of this, the Play Pals Corporation, the producer of the Good Guy dolls, recovered Chucky's remains in order to ensure that there is nothing wrong with the doll. However, a power surge resurrects Chucky, and he continues his pursuit of Andy in order to transfer his soul into his body before he is eventually trapped inside the doll's body forever. Now, it's mostly, for the most part, fast-paced. I think it's mostly, honestly, the fastest-paced out of all the films in the franchise. And I think the film is also cast very well. Like I said, I like Alex Vincent, and Jenny Agutter is also in the film. I've loved her ever since I first watched An American Werewolf in London, and I liked her in this film, and I thought she was pretty good. And also, she had cameos in the MCU. She appeared in the Avengers as well as Captain America the Winter Soldier. But her work in Child's Play 2, I think is very good. And also, the same year in 1990, when this film came out, she also had a small role in Darkman, and I liked her in that too, despite the fact that she had a small role in that, as well as her appearances into the MCU. And I like how she's willing to accept Andy into her home, despite the fact that he has had some trouble in the past due to his encounters with Chucky. And also her husband, played by Gerrit Graham, I hope I said his name right, is at first reluctant, but he goes along with it anyway. But over time, as the film progresses, he begins to regret accepting Andy into their home. And of course, when Chucky comes back and begins to stalk Andy and try to attempt to possess him, of course, Andy is trying to tell them that Chucky is trying to get him, and of course, nobody is going to believe him, just like he did in the first film. And like I mentioned earlier, I really like Christine Elise as Kyle, and what she goes through throughout most of the film, especially during the third act. I really like what she does here, and her and Alex Vincent have really good chemistry, and they work so well together throughout the rest of the film. At first, how Chucky manages to track down Andy to his foster home always bugged me for years. I mean, he calls his caseworker and tells him that he's Andy's uncle, which I don't think anybody could, now these days, could 100% buy that. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, that's one thing that's always bugged me about the film. But, I mean, of course, if that wouldn't happen, we wouldn't have a movie. There's at least, like, a few supporting characters that, I mean, that are some of the like weakest aspect of the film. Some of them are just there just to eventually be killed by Chucky. Gerrit Graham, I didn't mind him at first. I mean, he spends a large majority of the film complaining about like Andy causing trouble. I mean, at least he thinks that he's causing trouble, especially in one scene where he thinks either him or Kyle have broken a statue, which is basically a family heirloom to Joanne, who is Jenny Agutter's character. And when Andy keeps ranting on about Chucky still trying to get him, of course he still doesn't believe him and thinks that Andy is crazy and he needs professional help. And of course, later, right in the middle of the film, he eventually gets killed. And I felt like his entire purpose in the film was just to complain and then kill him. I think that overall, I think that Gerrit Graham is a good actor, but I just didn't really like how his character was portrayed in this film. I mean, he was mostly my biggest issue with this film. And I always liked the scene where when Andy goes to school, and I mean, right on his way to school when he takes the bus, how Chucky manages to sneak below the bus, and I'm like, how did he manage to do that without being seen? I mean, like, that's also another thing that bugs me. I'm like, sure, I mean, he does have his ways of using stealth, I mean, but it's broad daylight. I mean, eventually somebody might see you, Chucky. It's just like, that's another thing that's also bugged me. But it leads to another scene that may be one of the famous in the series, when Chucky kills Andy's school teacher by beating her to death with a yardstick, which I think is a very unique and honestly kind of original kill for the series, especially in horror films in general. And another original kill happens later in the climax, which I think is possibly the best kill, tied next to Chucky's death in this film. So, I mean, I'll get to that later. So Jenny Agutter's character assumes that Andy was somehow responsible in her husband's death. So she has him sent back to the foster center, and right before that, Andy warns Kyle about Chucky, and of course she still doesn't believe him, and she throws Chucky in the trash. Then while she's swinging on the swing set, then she finds the remains of the Tommy doll, and once she checks the trash can, she notices that Chucky isn't there, and then also realizes that Andy was telling the truth. And then she later finds Joanne dead, who is Jenny Agutter's character. And honestly, I mean, she is killed off screen, but honestly, I think I would have liked to see a scene where she saw Chucky and she immediately regrets, like, not believing Andy as well as sending him away. But I would have at least wanted to see her stick around for the final act of the film, but sadly that wasn't really the case. So Kyle eventually becomes the final girl of the film, and I like how she manages to, like, fight back Chucky. So he forces Kyle to drive to the foster center so he can try to get Andy again. And I like how while she's speeding, they eventually get pulled over by a cop, and then when the cop notices that Chucky's bloody nose, he's like, what the hell is going on with that doll? And I love Kyle's excuse where she says, you know, dolls that pee, this one bleeds. That always made me laugh. And when they get to the foster center, Chucky kills Andy's caseworker, and then we have this chase scene that ensues that later leads to them going to the Playhouse factory where they manufacture the good guy dolls. and Chucky would eventually try to do the ritual so he can transfer his soul into Annie's body. Of course, it doesn't work because he spent too much time in the doll's body, so now he's trapped in the doll's body permanently. And now, since he no longer has any purpose for Annie to live, he decides that he is going to kill Annie no matter what. So we have, I mean, the last few minutes of the film is nothing but intensity and action, and I love it for that reason. I mean, I do have complaints about the second act, but mostly when it comes to the third act, I love every second of it. And though there is one minor nitpick that I have with the third act, and it's like, there's barely any security there. I mean, sure, I mean, we do see like one guy still working there, but still, you may want to rethink hiring at least a bit more security there, guys. I mean, this is only a minor nitpick, but at least it leads to one memorable kill, which can be a lot of, I mean, which could be a fan favorite for this franchise. I mean, I know there's a lot of fans that like this one specific kill where Chucky kills the technician and then he gets stuck to this mechanism and he has his eyes gouged out with these doll eyes, and it's just like, ugh. And Chucky goes through hell in the third act. He, while he's chasing Kyle and Andy, he gets his arm stuck on this against this gate, and he's forced to rip it out. And he gives himself like a Ash Williams type upgrade when he adds a blade to his stump. And I always loved it when he get the line, "I hate kids." And even though it's not a chainsaw arm like Ash Williams from the Evil Dead series, it's still pretty awesome. I mean, and in case the putting a blade on his stuff wasn't enough, he is put in this machine that somehow like should have like mutilated him, but I mean it does, but it has his legs cut off when Andy and Kyle put him in this machine. He escapes and goes after them again. Andy tries to melt Chucky with molten plastic, and if that wasn't enough, Kyle finally manages to kill him by sticking an air hose in his mouth. His head inflates, and it explodes. God, the effects in this movie, I mean, you just gotta respect that. I mean, this is easily my favorite death of Chucky in the entire series, and I like how they improved the animatronics and the special effects, because, I mean, even though I do like most of the effects in the first film, and there are some moments in the first movie, and especially one shot in this film where you can tell, in some cases, you could tell that there was some person in a costume, and there are some moments where you can tell that they really improved on the animatronics, and that's one of the few reasons I think this movie holds up extremely well. So overall, I think that Child's Play 2 is pretty good, and I honestly think it's one of the best of the sequels, and it's just a blast. I'm going to give Child's Play 2 a B+. I highly recommend checking it out. It's definitely up your alley if you're into these types of films. And if you recently started getting into the Chucky movies, I definitely recommend checking this one out if you are a fan of this series overall. And, well, if you are a fan of this series, I pretty much guarantee that you would add this to your list of the favorite movies in this franchise. I don't know if you are, but you would probably agree with me on this. But anyway, thank you so much as always for watching. I'm looking forward to continuing my 3rd annual Halloween special throughout this week. And if you want my thoughts on old or new movies, of course, you know where to find me.